So, one of the most difficult things to explain to people going through depersonalization realization is that the symptoms being gone doesn't mean that you're recovered. And I know you hear that and you're like, how could that be so? How could the symptoms be gone and it doesn't mean that I'm recovered? I'm feeling better. I don't feel miserable anymore. So, isn't that recovery? Isn't that the definition of recovery that you don't have symptoms? So let me give you the example that I give a lot that isn't a perfect analogy, but I think it's pretty close to, you know, it's as close to perfect as you can get, which is hard to find, okay, when you're looking for analogies. Let's say that a couple had severe marriage issues, okay? There was lack of communication, there was unforgiveness, they weren't spending quality time together, there were all kinds of emotional triggers. The list just goes on and on. And let's say because of that, there was a huge lack of connection in the relationship, which was causing all kinds of fights, right? Constant fights, screaming, yelling. And let's say at some point, the person, uh, one of the people in the marriage said, you know what? I'm just not going to talk to this person anymore. And they decide to move out. And they're not talking to the person, and the fights stop. Did that person ever truly deal with the source of the fights? Is their marriage healed? Or are they experiencing results by way of separation? Like, yeah, if you are not connected to that person, if you're not around them, well, then there can't be any fights. But that doesn't automatically mean that you've dealt with the roots of why the fights were happening to begin with. You never dealt with the unforgiveness. You never dealt with the trust issues. You never dealt with the communication issues. You never dealt with the quality time issues or this thing or that. And so here's what you need to know about depersonalization realization. They happen at the point of overwhelm in the nervous system. Okay. Whenever our brain perceives threat, the very first thing that we look to calm ourselves down is actually social engagement. We look to other people to calm us down. If we can't find regulation through social engagement, then we go into fight or flight response. And if we feel too trapped and overwhelmed to fight or flee, that's when we go into the freeze response, which is also called a trauma response. And that's when depersonalization and realization show up. Okay, is at the point of overwhelming stress. And depersonalization and realization are our brain's circuit breaker. It's our brain's way of separating us or dissociating us from either our body, which is depersonalization, or the material world, which is derealization. Okay. I went through both of those symptoms. 2 years 24/7, 5 years off and on. It was the most terrifying thing that I've ever been through in my entire life. Okay. And I oftentimes say I would not wish these symptoms on my worst enemy. They are that bad. Okay. And they're that bad because your brain literally thinks that you're dying. I'm not saying you are. You've just had a very painful history. But your brain thinks that you're dying because your nervous system and body are so exhausted and so overwhelmed. And so these symptoms would have to be severe enough to dissociate or separate you from the pain of being eaten by a lion. That's why they feel like death. And then it's not just DPDR usually. Once you enter a trauma state, the timekeeper of the brain shuts down, so time starts to feel very distorted. The memory can fragment, so all of a sudden you start to experience just bits and pieces of memory or no memories at all, right? There's a huge shutdown of the prefrontal cortex, logical, critical, creative, contextual thinking, attentional awareness. I mean, you literally feel like a zombie. And then a lot of DPDR sufferers are also going through traditional anxiety symptoms. Not all of them, because in the deepest state of traumatic stress, there is no anxiety at all. But nonetheless, this literally feels like death. But with that being said, the reason why they're kicking in is because you're experiencing your embodied self. This is called interoception. And that's overwhelming. And so the circuit breaker of depersonalization kicks in to make you feel dissociated from your body. That's how your brain's giving you relief. If you feel overwhelmed in the present moment, derealization kicks in to make you feel like everything's a dream world, okay? To create a buffer between you and the material world. Because if everything feels fake and dreamlike, you're not as integrated into your sensory environment as to be more overwhelmed, okay? And if you feel out of body, you're not as integrated into your body as to feel more overwhelmed in your body, okay? It's your brain trying to protect you. So let's say there's a couple situations I want to speak to as to why the symptoms going away doesn't mean that you're recovered. Number one is distraction. Distraction is where the approach is I'm just going to focus on other things. I'm going to think about anything and everything other than the symptoms, and I'm just going to keep my mind occupied 24/7. And for some people, they get so deep in their head that they are no longer interoceptive. They're not experiencing their embodied self. And they're not in the present moment because their mind is whatever they're distracted with. And so if you're not experiencing your body, then the circuit breaker of depersonalization may not kick in anymore to separate you from overwhelming your body because you're not in your body. And if you're so distracted that you're not in the present moment, well, then your brain doesn't need to kick in derealization to dissociate you from the present moment. And so people think, okay, well, I'm recovered, right? The symptoms are gone. But the problem with that is it's kind of like the analogy that I use of a hoarder's house. If you have a hoarder's house where there's so much trash and just random stuff that you can't even walk through it, and your solution is that you move out, yeah, you may not be as overwhelmed because you're not in the house, but you're also not really dealing with the root, just like the marriage example. And the only way that we can truly fix the hoarding issue is to go back in the house as we're cleaning up the mess, okay? And that's the only real way to deal with these symptoms is you have to get back in your body and you have to face the things in your life that are creating overwhelm in your life. And that's hard. That's overwhelming in and of itself. But it's the only way. It's the only way to truly ensure that these symptoms don't come back, because what happens with people all the time, I've been seeing this for 7 years straight now, is they try the distraction stuff and they think that they're recovered, but while they're in their head distracting, their body is becoming more and more of a war zone and their life is full of all kinds of things that need to be changed, especially nervous system war zones, which is an environment that is highly chaotic, punitive, aggressive, unstable, or unpredictable. And if you're always in your head, you're not going to be aware of just how toxic the environment is. Or maybe there's a lack of boundaries in your life, or there's just things that you're doing that are toxic for your nervous system. If you're not in your body and you're not in the present moment, you're not going to be aware of these things. So it's very deceptive. So that's the first situation, okay, that happens where people think that they're recovered, but they're actually not recovered, is they used distraction. The next thing that people do is acceptance, okay? I'm not against acceptance, okay? I think that acceptance is really good for addressing the specific layer of resistance towards symptoms, okay? And there was a point in my life where acceptance pretty much saved my life, because there was a time where resistance, extreme resistance, was one of the main layers that was keeping my nervous system overwhelmed. And so whenever I started to invite in the symptoms, there was a little while where my DPDR shut off. I wasn't having as severe of anxiety anymore. And I told everybody that I was recovered, but I never dealt with the things in my body or my life that I needed to address. And so years later, all the symptoms came back. And then I tried acceptance and it didn't work anymore, because at that point, my body was far too overwhelmed for any of that stuff to work. And the distraction stuff never worked for me, by the way. So with that being said, there are some people that if resistance of symptoms is the primary layer of the stress onion, I historically have said onion, and my wife told me about that. And so onion, okay? And for those people, invitation may be enough to calm their nervous system, at least temporarily, at least out of a point of overwhelm, which is what's causing DPDR and the panic attacks. But that doesn't mean that they've dealt with the roots that are outside of just resisting symptoms. It's like, why were they in symptoms to begin with? Resistance of symptoms can't be the root cause because there has to be symptoms there for you to resist. So there was obviously a lot of dysregulation in the nervous system and in their body and things in their life that needed to change. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have symptoms to resist. So it's like, yes, do acceptance. That's great. That's fine. I teach my clients this, but it's such a small part of what I teach them. The third reason that symptoms may shut off, but you're not truly fully recovered, is reassurance. I have spoken with so many people, actually a couple of people within the last few weeks that told me they lived off of reassurance for years before they finally started working with me. They would watch my videos or other people's videos that kind of gave them that reassurance that they weren't going crazy. And they were temporarily calmed, but because they never dealt with all these things that I'm talking about, facing their body, facing their life, making the appropriate lifestyle adjustments, the calm didn't last. And eventually they had to make that decision that I'm tired of living off of temporary reassurance. I'm ready to deal with the things happening in my body and in my life. Okay. And so just because your nervous system is temporarily calmed by reassurance, it doesn't mean that you've actually rewired the nervous system, even if your symptoms temporarily shut off. And one of the ways to know that you haven't dealt with the root is that the symptoms keep coming back. It's not that you have been recovered for a year and then, the symptoms come back and then you have to recover again and then they leave and then they come back and you're recovering over and over again. I've had people tell me like, Jordan, I've recovered like 8 times. You haven't recovered one time. What you're doing are things that temporarily are either calming your nervous system or separating you from your body and your nervous system, which is giving you temporary results. And I know that this isn't exciting to talk about, but the good news is once you actually rewire your brain, body, and nervous system, you never have to deal with this again. Okay. And so that's it. That's what I wanted to say. So with that being said, if you are interested in learning how to get to the root of these symptoms, I've created a free 5-shifts masterclass for you. Click the link in the description. It's also in the first pinned comment. It will share everything that you need. Even if you never work with me, it's going to equip you with what's going on and what you need to focus on to actually deal with the root. There's also an application if you'd like to work with me and my team. We'd be happy to take a look at your situation. And as I always say, I don't care who you work with, okay? If you wanted to apply and see if what we do is what you're looking for, that's great. But literally, human to human, I want you to feel better, okay? I want you to get off this hamster wheel so you can tap into your full potential and reign in life. But the current approach that you're using is not dealing with the root. If you were doing one of these 3 things, and if you want to get to full recovery, you have to address what's happening in the body as well as in your life. The 5-shifts masterclass will get you in the right direction. And regardless of who you work with, I hope and pray that you will deal with the root so you can experience the joy that is available to you in life. Okay. With that being said, click like if this helped you, comment something below, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you.